Once upon a time, the MSC Napoli grounded in 2007, and during that grounding, the expert found that 20% of the cargo differed from the declared manifest. The Maritime Bureau concluded that obviously this eliminated the safety margins, although I emphasize that the grounding was not caused by the problem with the container's weight. At around the same time, Marin, which is a Dutch research institute, conducted a survey called Lashing at Sea Project, and they came to a similar conclusion. And they concluded that variability in cargo weight undermines safe storage and securing. Both findings were reported to the IMO, and they got drafted. This led to a working group, and eventually to the amendment to SOLAS. SOLAS is globally binding. As I said, it came into force in July. Greece, very quickly, in August, a month later, implemented the changes in SOLAS. We expect that the changes to SOLAS will have a major impact on corporation practices. Although SOLAS relates to safety at sea, as you all know, we also suspect that it will have consequences on the shore activities. So what are these changes? Gross mass is the content of the container, the cargo, the dunnage, and the securing, plus the tear being the weight of the container. And the verified gross mass can be obtained by two methods under this legislation. Either you weigh the packed container after it's been sealed, or you weigh all its constituent parts and add up the weight of the container. The VGM is sent by the shipper to the carrier and the terminal, and they use it in storage planning. If no VGM is produced, then the carrier is entitled not to load the container. It's quite simple. The key aspect is that the shipper is responsible either under method 1 or method 2 when it comes to weighting the cargo. Both methods can be delegated to a third party, but both methods also require a certified and calibrated weighing equipment. A few more key aspects. Estimation is not permitted. The shipper may rely on others, but he will ultimately remain responsible. All the carrier has to do is receive a signed VGM, and I emphasize the word signed here. Now we'll go through a few questions that are asked concerning this legislation. Who is the shipper in this context? Well, under SOLAS, the shipper is the entity on the bill. It's quite simple. Whoever puts his name in the box as shipper will be responsible. There is another definition by the Maritime Safety Committee, which is slightly wider. The shipper is the legal entity named on the bill or the seaway bill or an equivalent multimodal transport document and or contract of carriage. Now, due to the complexity of the supply chain in the container trade, the shipper on the bill may not have direct control on the key elements which will allow him to determine the VGM. The shipper should be aware of his responsibilities and ensure that arrangements are in place to provide VGM in compliance with international regulations. Commercially, the parties should agree under the contract of sale, under the Incoterms, who will do what, who should determine and who will provide the VGM and how. Is there an agreed format to communicate VGM? Well, here SOLAS really left it to the parties. They gave a few guidelines, though. The same information should be provided whether it's under method 1 or method 2, i.e. the VGM should be signed by the shipper. The information can be transmitted electronically, provided it is signed in capital letters with the name of the shipper. There are new EDI messages which have already been created for VGM. One of them is called VERMAS, verification of the mass, and there is a similar system in the US. And more broadly and commercially, the parties should discuss, again, the form and the precise substance of the information provided. Is there a deadline to provide VGM. Again, well, SOLAS is silent on this. The IMO decided to leave it to the parties to agree on what should be done and when. The shipper should liaise with the carrier and find out what their cut-off time is. Now, the important point here is there an obligation on the carrier to verify the VGM and report to the authorities any discrepancies? Well, the answer here is no. There is no obligation on the carrier to verify or report to the authorities. However, if a container is weighted by the terminal and there is a difference in the value or the mass, what happens? Well, again, SOLAS is silent on that, and it's left to the carrier and the terminal to put together a process to determine which value they should use. What is the margin of error? Again, no provision in SOLAS on that. It's left to the national authorities to determine the level of accuracy. There are no international standards. There are some recommendations and guidelines by an organization I had never heard of before called the Organization of Legal Metrology. Accuracy is the only concept the shipper should be worried or concerned about, as he may be exposed to sanctions under the local or the applicable national legislation. Should factors influencing the weight be taken into account, such as humidity? Well, I think this is only likely to affect the overall mass, unlikely to affect the overall mass, so it's not a safety concern. What will be the level of penalties for misdeclaration or non-declaration? Again, the IMO has left that to the national authorities to decide. Obviously, there will be commercial implications, if the container is rejected, this may delay the whole shipment. What about the first method? If there is a weighbridge, but it doesn't issue tickets, is the driver's consignment note acceptable? Well, there is no obligation under SOLAS for the weighbridge to issue a ticket. The only thing that SOLAS require is for the shipper to communicate VGM in a shipping document that can be part of shipping instructions. Either way, the document should highlight the VGM and be signed by someone who is authorized by the shipper or the shipper himself, and he should have used certified equipment. What about a situation where the port container handling equipment is accurate to within 5%? Is that acceptable? Again, nothing in SOLAS on that. It's left to the local authorities, but I think a margin of 5% is unlikely to meet the applicable standards. Who will pay for the weighing process? Commercial issue. SOLAS is silent on that. The parties have to agree in their contract as to who will pay. I don't know if there are any freight forwarders in this room, but what about a situation where you have a freight forwarder who loads a container, a less than container load? In other words, he doesn't fill up the whole of the container. Well, this will depend on the contract with his co-loading freight forwarder and who enters into the contract of carriage and becomes the shipper under the bill of lading. If it is acceptable under the contract with the master freight forwarder, the forwarder may use the second method and pass the information to the party completing the packing, and then who will remain responsible under the bill as shipper. What about a situation where the shipper delivers to the freight forwarder without knowing the mass, and then ask the freight forwarder to establish the VGM and issue the document? Again, this will depend on the contract. If the freight forwarder is the shipper under the bill, he weighs the cargo and issues the VGM. If the VGM is obtained from the freight forwarder, the shipper who will appear on the bill will remain responsible. So he's got to trust what the freight forwarder does and how he does it. What if the tear is lacking or inaccurate due to wear and tear? The tear mass is normally marked on the exterior of the container when it is manufactured, and the shipper should only rely on this information. Where it is missing or damaged, obviously the shipper should contact the container operator for to rectify the problem. In conclusion, I'll say that while the IMO refers or focuses on safety in relation to loss of container at sea and storage issue, it may well be that it will have a greater benefit to the road and rail sector. In the broader context, the work continues with ISO in relation to handling and securing of containers, revisions to the Container Safety Convention, revisions to the Packing Code, and last but not least, the due diligence circular, which will apply to this, which deals with best practices for selection of contractors, and obviously be relevant to VGM and general cargo packing services.